Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. So today we are going to study a new topic, okay, which is about respiration. Okay, so I hope you guys have done some reading prior to our class. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so the chapter name is Cellular Respiration. Okay, what does cellular means? Okay, why it should have the word cellular in the front? Because it happened in the cell. Okay, respiration happen in the cell. So that's why in a complete name, we should call it as a cellular respiration, where the respiration will occur in the cell. Okay, what does respiration means? Okay, to simplify it, I would say respiration is a process to produce energy. Okay, to produce energy. Why energy is very important? Because energy, we need them to continue our living. For example, we use energy to move, okay, to pray, to do our daily activity and so on. So let's continue. Okay, so that's why I said cellular respiration, the main aim is to produce energy. Okay, you have to know about, okay, let's read this one. Okay, yang ni you have learned previously, which is about metabolic reaction. Okay, metabolic reaction, we have two, anabolism and catabolism. Okay, catabolism means that will release energy. Okay, while anabolism will use the energy. Okay, I just want to simplify here. The main substance, okay, in energy production, or the main substrate, okay, substrate tu maksudnya the ingredient, okay, apa yang kita perlukan to produce energy. Okay, substrate maksudnya ingredient lah, bahan-bahan yang kita perlukan so that we can produce energy. Okay, so in cellular respiration, okay, the most important things that we should have is glucose. Glucose. So remember, glucose is a very important ingredient in order to produce energy in cellular respiration lah. So that's why they highlight glucose. Okay, so this glucose actually can be obtained, okay, from the digestion of carbohydrate from the food eaten. So when you eat food, for example, you eat rice, you eat noodle, you eat kway teow, you eat bread, okay, those food will give you glucose. So when you get glucose, you can produce energy. Okay. Okay, so bear in mind, there are two types of cellular respiration. The first one is aerobic respiration. The next one is called anaerobic respiration. Okay, so cikgu ulang So respiration ataupun cellular respiration ada dua jenis aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration is also known as a fermentation. So nama lain bagi anaerobic respiration is fermentation. Okay, dia ada dua nama untuk anaerobic ni So you can either use anaerobic respiration or fermentation. Okay, they are the same. So what is the difference between these two? So if you notice, for aerobic respiration, it occur in the presence of oxygen. Bila ada oksigen, nama dia adalah aerobic respiration. So respiration tadi, as I mentioned, it require glucose, betul tak? So in order to carry out aerobic respiration, you should have glucose and oxygen. Faham tak? Tapi kalau anaerobic respiration or fermentation, they occur in the presence of oxygen. So glucose will directly be broken down into energy. Maksudnya tak perlukan oksigen lah. Macam tadi, glucose plus oksigen. Yang ni glucose sahaja without using oxygen. Okay, ni fermentation is alternative pathway of obtaining energy besides cellular respiration. Lepas tu dia cakap ini fermentation, the breakdown of glucose is incomplete in the condition of limited oxygen or without oxygen. So without oxygen ataupun limited oxygen, we call it as a fermentation, as known as anaerobic respiration. Maksudnya tak guna oksigen langsung ataupun kita guna oksigen sedikit sahaja. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, now we go in detail about aerobic respiration. So kita tengok apa maksud aerobic respiration ya. Aerobic respiration is the breakdown of glucose. It's a breakdown of glucose involving oxygen. So you should highlight, we should have glucose, we should have oxygen in aerobic respiration. To what? To produce chemical energy. So oxygen is used to oxidize glucose to produce carbon dioxide, water and energy. Okay, oxidize ni nama lainnya awak boleh gunakan sebagai breakdown. Breakdown tu maksudnya kita pecahkan. Maksudnya oxygen will break down the glucose. Why? To produce carbohydrate, carbon dioxide, water and energy. So this is the words equation for aerobic respiration, where we need oxygen and glucose. So this will produce what? This will produce carbon dioxide plus water and energy. So this is the amount of energy will be produced when you have one molecule of glucose. So kalau awak ada satu molecule of glucose, this is the energy that you will get. So if you eat 10 glucose, yang this one you darab dengan 10 je lah. So this is the amount of energy. Okay, K tu kilo, J tu joule. Joule is the unit for energy. Okay, so kita pergi detail sikit lah. Okay, so apa lagi dia cakap kat sini? The aerobic respiration process begin with the glycolysis process. Okay, so before this formula we can use, you should know there is something happen behind this. Okay, ada benda yang berlaku lah. Okay, so it begins with glycolysis. Apa glycolysis? Glycolysis means the breakdown of glucose by the enzyme. Okay, and this process occur in cytoplasm. Cytoplasm tu kat mana cikgu? Cytoplasm tu inside the cell. Okay, so one glucose is breakdown into two pyruvate molecule. So pertama sekali, before in aerobic respiration, first step dia adalah glycolysis. Yang mana glucose tu will be broken down into pyruvate. And this one will happen in the cytoplasm. Boleh faham tak? Okay, seterusnya what happen? The following process occur in mitochondria. Okay, kenapa mitochondria? Because we know that the function of mitochondria is to produce energy, specifically ATP energy. Sebab tu dia berlaku dekat mitochondria. Tapi glycolysis ni they happen in the cytoplasm. So what happen in the mitochondria? Tengok. Pyruvate produced from glycolysis is then oxidized to a series of reactions to produce carbon dioxide, water and energy. And a large amount of this energy is used to produce ATP energy ataupun adenosine triphosphate molecule. So pyruvate that is produced in the cytoplasm will enter the mitochondria. For what? Okay, so that it can combine with oxygen. Sebab tu dia cakap oxidize. Oxidize tu maksudnya oksigen dia akan combine ataupun breakdown dia pyruvate. Untuk hasilkan apa? Untuk hasilkan carbon dioxide, water and energy. Okay. Okay, so sekarang ni kita dah dapat tenaga, betul tak? Tapi kat sini dia cakap apa? A large amount of this energy. Ni energy ni. Okay, will be used to produce ATP molecule. So actually it's not end here. Okay, ada lagi proses yang kita kena cerita kat sini. Okay, lepas tu dia cakap aerobic respiration is simplified as below. So ATP energy are produced when a group of non-organic phosphate is added to the adenosine diphosphate. So benda ni sebenarnya dia ada di dalam mitochondria. Benda ni ada di dalam mitochondria. So ADP. Cikgu, tapi tadi cikgu cakap ATP ya. ATP tu is the product. Is the product. So in order to produce ATP, it begins with ADP. Apa beza dia? Awak tengok kalau ATP adenosine triphosphate. Tapi kalau ADP adenosine. Okey, sama adenosine. Apa beza dia? Yang ni yang ni tri. Yang ni di. Faham tak? So di ni apa maksud dia cikgu? Di ni maksudnya dia ada dua phosphate. Dia ada dua sahaja phosphate. Kalau tri dia ada 3 phosphate. So sekarang ni awak tengok ADP ada 2 phosphate. Dia campur satu lagi phosphate. So dia akan jadi triphosphate. Sebab apa? Sekarang di sini kan ada satu phosphate dicampur kan. So in order to add ADP with with phosphate, awak perlukan tenaga. Tenaga tu datang daripada mana ni? Datang daripada sini. Datang daripada sini. Sini awak tengok energy tu. This energy will be used so that ADP can combine with phosphate to produce ATP. Okay. So ATP molecule have weak phosphate link. When the phosphate link on the ATP are broken, the energy will be released to the cell to help us carry out daily activity. So ATP ni, okay, daripada mitochondria ni, okay, awak kena ingat tenaga ni dia need to be transfer, okay, in the form of ATP. So contohlah, okay, ni mitochondria ya. Sekarang ni mitochondria tu dah hasilkan ATP energy. Okay, sekarang ni contohlah ribosom. Okay, ribosom. Okay, ribosom tu dia perlukan tenaga sebagai contoh. Ribosom require energy. Kenapa ribosom perlukan tenaga cikgu? Sebab ribosom ni dia nak menghasilkan protein. In order to produce protein, dia perlukan apa? Dia perlukan tenaga. Betul tak? So apa yang akan berlaku kat sini adalah, okay, mitochondria ni it will produce ATP. Betul tak? ATP ni. So ATP ni akan dibawa ke ribosom. So ATP tu dia will be brought out to the ribosome. So once the ATP arrive in the ribosome, it will be broken down. It will be broken down into ADP and phosphate. So sekarang ni kenapa kita nak pecahkan? So that the energy is released. So energy ni lah akan digunakan oleh ribosome tu. So this energy that is produced through the breakdown of ATP, okay, will be used by the ribosome for daily activity. Apa daily activity untuk ribosome? To produce protein. Itu maksud dia. Okay. So this is the original formula for aerobic respiration sebenarnya. Tapi in order to transport the energy, okay, ATP energy is required. So energy ni digunakan untuk disimpan di dalam ATP. So ATP tu bila dia sampai dekat targeted area, it will be broken down into ADP and phosphate. Okay, lepas tu apa jadi pada dua ni? Dia akan kembali. It will return to the mitochondria for the next ATP production. Ingat energy tu dia kena dihantar menggunakan ATP. Sebab tu kita namakan sebagai ATP energy. Okay. Okay guys, so that's all for aerobic respiration. Now we go for fermentation. Macam cikgu cakap tadi, fermentation is also known as anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. So apa maksud dia? Okay, fermentation is incomplete breakdown of glucose in condition of limited oxygen or without oxygen. Okay, awak kena ingat kalau aerobic respiration, okay, dia sepatutnya kena ada perkataan complete kat sini. Aerobic respiration is a complete breakdown. Tapi kalau anaerobic ataupun fermentation, dia incomplete. Ni breakdown juga kan. Sepatutnya kat sini, dia letak perkataan complete. Sebab apa complete? Sebab apa kita akan guna semua glukos. 100% of glucose will be used here. To what? To produce energy. Sebab tu energy banyak dihasilkan. Sebab apa? Kita guna banyak sangat tenaga. Kita guna banyak sangat glukos. Kita guna semua. Tapi kalau kat sini, kalau awak tengok, dia cakap incomplete. Maksudnya sebagai contoh lah, kita ada 100 glukos. Only 50% of it will be used. Sebab apa? We use without oxygen ataupun limited oxygen. Okay, boleh. Fermentation is a different from aerobic respiration in metabolic pathway after glycolysis stage. Okay, after glycolysis, the pyruvate produced will undergo either alcohol fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. Okay, so dekat aerobic dekat aerobic respiration tadi, kita tahu first stage dia adalah glycolysis. Lepas tu baru oxidation of pyruvate. Okay, same goes to the anaerobic respiration atau fermentation. Okay, glycolysis will still happen where the glucose will be converted into pyruvate by enzyme, and this occur in the cytoplasm. Tapi dekat anaerobic ataupun fermentation, there is no oxidation of pyruvate. Why? Because it never use oxygen. Dia tak gunakan oxygen. Okay. So what happen to the pyruvate tu? Pyruvate tu dia akan undergo either alcohol fermentation ataupun lactic acid fermentation. Okay, jom kita tengok apa beza dua ni. Okay, the first one, we go for alcohol fermentation. Ni, dia cakap alcohol fermentation. Okay, cikgu nak divide kat sini. Awak kena ingat. Alcohol fermentation is meant for the plant. Okay, itu dah sikit. Alcohol fermentation is meant for the plant. Why? Lactic acid fermentation is meant for the human and animal. Human and animal. Okay, so maksudnya awak kena ingat anaerobic respiration ni, it can occur in all living thing, including plant, human and animal. Boleh faham tak? Sama juga dengan aerobic respiration. Ni, aerobic respiration also will happen in all living organism. Dekat tumbuh-tumbuhan, dekat haiwan, dekat animal and so on. Okay, same goes to fermentation ataupun anaerobic respiration. It will happen in all living organism. Tak kisahlah bakteria ke, tumbuh-tumbuhan ke, semut ke, lipas ke, beruang ke, tak kisah, manusia dan sebagainya. Okay? Tapi bear in mind, alcohol fermentation only happen in the plant. Kalau lactic acid fermentation happen in human ataupun animal. Okay? So we go for alcohol fermentation first. Ni, alcohol fermentation ni. Okay, so apa jadi ni? Awak tengok ni. Incomplete breakdown of glucose into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. So glucose tadi, dia akan ditukarkan kepada ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Okay, you compare here. This is the energy will be produced. Okay, 210. Tapi kalau kita buat aerobic respiration, awak tengok ada berapa? Ada 2,898. So this is a very huge amount of energy will be produced. Sebab apa? Sebab kita buat complete oxidation of oxygen. Complete oxidation of glucose. Tapi kalau kita guna anaerobic respiration atau fermentation, only a little. And then incomplete. Sebab apa? Sebab kita tak menggunakan oxygen. So this is the product. Okay. So contoh dia apa? Yeast. Yeast. Ethanol, ni awak tengok ni. Dia akan hasilkan apa? Okay, yeast tu dia akan buat anaerobic respiration ataupun alcohol fermentation where the glucose will be incompletely break down into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. So ethanol dalam yeast ni digunakan untuk apa? Ethanol is used in making of beer ataupun wine, and the release of carbon dioxide will make the bread dough rise. Sebab tu dalam kek ke, dalam roti ke, kita guna yeast. Sebab apa? Yeast tu dia akan guna glucose untuk carry out an aerobic respiration ataupun alcohol fermentation. So what happen is that it will release carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide tu adalah gas. Gas tu it will give a pressure. Dia akan bagi tekanan dekat roti tu supaya roti tu naik. Okay, so this is how it works. Cikgu, lepas tu kalau orang Islam, ethanol ni bukan halal, haram ke? Okay, you have to remember, ethanol will be produced in a very little amount. Sikit sangat ethanol yang akan dihasilkan. So, it is forgiven, I guess. Okay, lepas tu kalau plant, apa jadi? Awak tengok, padi plant that grow in a waterlogged area with less oxygen are able to carry out alcohol fermentation. Sebagai contoh, dekat padi ni kan. Dekat padi ni, usually ada banyak air yang bertakung. Bila banyak air bertakung, maksudnya adalah kuranglah oksigen yang ada dalam akar tu boleh absorb oksigen. So alternatively, in order to survive, they will do alcohol fermentation. So ethanol produced in the tissue during fermentation is a toxic to the most plant, but the cell of the paddy have higher tolerance for ethanol compared to other species. So what happened? The paddy plant produce plenty of alcohol, dehydrogenase enzyme that can break down the ethanol molecule into non-toxic carbon dioxide. So maksudnya, even though this paddy plant, it carry out alcohol fermentation, for sure they will produce alcohol. Alcohol ni dia acid tau, ataupun dia ni adalah toxic. So this is for sure, this can harm the plant. So alternatively, padi plant tu dia akan hasilkan sejenis enzim. Nama enzim tu adalah alcohol dehydrogenase. Apa fungsi alcohol dehydrogenase? Is to break down the ethanol. So ethanol tu akan ditukar kepada carbon dioxide using enzyme. Nama enzim tu alcohol dehydrogenase. Okay, boleh faham? Okay, now we done for alcohol fermentation. Now we go for lactic acid fermentation. Tadi kita belajar ni ada dua kan fermentation ni kan, alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Now we done with alcohol fermentation. Now we go for lactic acid fermentation. Saya tengok lactic acid fermentation. Sama juga it will incomplete kena ada perkataan incomplete breakdown of glucose into lactic acid and energy. Tapi kalau macam ni awak tengok dia glucose tu hasilkan apa? Dia akan hasilkan ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Tapi kalau lactic acid fermentation, no carbon dioxide, just lactic acid and energy. Okay. Okay, jom kita tengok apa berlaku. So ada dua contoh kat sini. Yang pertama adalah sebut macam mana dah ni? Lactobacillus. Macam tu lah kot. Okay, so apa bakteria ni buat? Okay, so this bacteria will carry out fermentation to produce yogurt. Okay, yang awak makan yogurt tu kan. So bakteria ni akan buat apa? It will act on the lactose, okay, and turn into lactic acid. So maksudnya instead of glucose, this bacteria will use lactose. Ingat dalam lactose ni kita ada apa? Kita ada glucose and galactose. So dia akan guna glucose lah kat situ. Tapi kat sini dia mention pasal lactose lah. Okay, so apa yang akan jadi? So this bacteria will convert the lactose into lactic acid and energy. So lactic acid will coagulate with the casein to produce yogurt. Sebab itulah bila awak makan yogurt awak rasa masam. Sebab apa? Sifat asid tu adalah masam. Boleh faham? So lactic acid is the source of the sour taste in the yogurt. Okay, so this is the first example. The next example is human muscle cell ataupun animal muscle cell. Boleh either way. Okay, so ingat human muscle cell also will carry out lactic acid fermentation. Why? Okay, this process is carried out by the muscle cell during vigorous training. Vigorous training tu maksudnya contohnya when you are jogging, when you are jumping, and whatever lah. So during vigorous training, the rate of oxygen used exceed the oxygen supply by the blood circulatory system. So the muscle is in the oxygen deficiency state and set to undergo oxygen debt. Maksudnya kat sini, bila awak melakukan exercise, the amount of oxygen you require is higher. Bila awak melakukan aktiviti cerdas, macam sebagai contoh awak nak berlari dan sebagainya kan, mestilah awak perlukan oksigen dalam kuantiti yang lebih banyak daripada biasa. Sekarang ni awak duduk biasa, awak duduk relax kan, awak tak buat apa-apa. So condition oksigen tu adalah normal. Tapi bila awak berlari, awak jogging dan sebagainya, oksigen yang diperlukan tu adalah lebih besar berbanding daripada yang biasa. Sebab itulah muscle awak ni dia akan undergo oxygen debt. Hutang oksigen. Apa maksud hutang oksigen? Ni kita nak belajar ni. Awak tengok. During this process, the glucose cannot break down completely. Okay, for each glucose that is broken down, only 2 ATP energy or 150 kJ of energy will be produced. Okay, the produced lactic acid accumulate until it reach the level of concentration that can cause fatigue and muscle cramp. So maksudnya when our muscle do an aerobic respiration ataupun lactic acid fermentation, okay, lactic acid tu it can cause us to have fatigue and muscle cramp. Okay, awak akan rasa keletihan dan muscle cramp. Sebab itulah lepas awak jogging ataupun awak berlari dan sebagainya, awak akan rasa letih dan juga awak akan rasa muscle cramp. Muscle cramp tu maksudnya adalah awak rasa otot awak ni kejang. Sebab apa? There are so many lactic acid, okay, will accumulate in your muscle. Okay, once the vigorous activity stop, the intake of excess glucose will oxidize the lactic acid into carbon dioxide, water and energy. And when all the lactic acid has been expelled, the oxygen debt is repaid. Okay, so sekarang ni bila awak berlari kan, Bila awak berlari, muscle awak ni akan buat anaerobic respiration ataupun lactic acid fermentation. So as a result, lactic acid will more accumulate in your muscle. Betul tak? Okay, so lactic acid tu akan menyebabkan awak rasa letih dan juga awak akan rasa muscle cramp. Tapi when you stop your vigorous exercise, lepas awak habis jogging, okay, bila awak dah habis jogging kan, awak perasan tak awak akan breathe in and breathe out repeatedly. Sebab apa? Sebab awak nak ambil lebih banyak oksigen, betul tak? Oksigen yang awak ambil yang masa tu, excess oksigen tu akan oxidize. Oxidize tu breakdown akan breakdown lactic acid tu ditukarkan kepada carbon dioxide, water and energy. Sebab itulah bila awak ambil banyak oksigen tu, oksigen tu akan tukar lactic acid tu. Lactic acid ni tak boleh lama-lama dalam body kita. Dia harus disingkirkan. Macam mana kita nak singkirkan? Kita ambil oksigen tu dan kita tukarkan lactic acid tu menjadi carbon dioxide, water and energy. So bila lactic acid tu semua dah disingkirkan daripada badan kita, oxygen depth tu akan repeat. Maksudnya kita tak ada hutang oksigen dah. Sebab itulah bila awak jogging kan, lepas awak jogging awak akan rasa muscle cramp. Lepas tu beberapa minit kemudian lepas awak tarik nafas panjang-panjang tu, awak akan rasa normal balik. Sebab apa? Lactic acid tu dah tak ada dah. Boleh faham? Okey, awak tengok. Figure 7.1 show a lack of oxygen in the muscle and oxygen depth is repeat. Ni awak tengok So ni in the beginning of exercise. In the beginning of exercise, awak tengok the oxygen intake during oxygen dia naik. Sebab apa? Kenapa oxygen intake increase? Sebab bila awak nak exercise, awak kena ada energy. In order to have energy, awak kena ada oxygen. Ni awak tengok lack of oxygen. Ni adalah hutang awak ni, yang warna merah ni. Tapi when you stop, ni at the end of exercise ni, awak akan bernafas tercungak-cungak, betul tak? Supaya awak ambil lebih banyak oksigen. Untuk apa? Untuk cover balik oksigen depth ni. And then oksigen intake awak akan jadi normal balik. Okay, faham? At the end of recovery. Okay guys, so this is the last slide of today. So now we want to compare between aerobic respiration and fermentation. Ingat fermentation ni nama lain dia adalah anaerobic respiration. So yang ni atas ni similarity, okay, persamaan dia. Kita tengok satu-satu. Apa persamaan dia? Okay, pertama sekali cakap the breakdown of glucose and maksudnya both of aerobic and fermentation it occur the breakdown of glucose. Maksudnya dia akan adalah proses kita breakdown glucose ataupun glycolysis. Yang ni. Glycolysis ni. Ni glycolysis. Glycolysis happen in aerobic respiration and also happen in the fermentation. Dua-dua berlaku So ingat glycolysis tu refer to the breakdown of glucose. Lepas tu apa lagi persamaan dia? It begins in the cytoplasm. Betul lah, it begin in the cytoplasm. Sebab apa? Cytoplasm is the place where you can find glucose. Lepas tu it occur in yeast, bacteria, animal and plant. To simplify it, I would say it happen in all living organism. All living organism. Lepas tu it produce chemical energy in the form of ATP. So maksudnya in order to transport energy tu kita kena ada ATP. Okay, lepas tu apa lagi persamaan dia? The process begin with glycolysis. When the glucose is converted into pyruvate. So maksudnya samalah dengan ni. Okay, it involve the breakdown of glucose ataupun it involve glycolysis. Okay, this is the different between them. So kalau aerobic respiration, the breakdown of glucose is complete. Tapi kalau ini, the breakdown of glucose is incomplete. Yang ni with the presence of oxygen. Yang ni without oxygen ataupun limited oxygen condition. Okay, lepas tu yang ni occur in cytoplasm and mitochondria. Tapi kalau fermentation occur in the cytoplasm. Okay, the next one. Kalau aerobic respiration, it produce water. Ni awak tengok ni. Mana? Ni it produce water. Ni it produce water. But fermentation, awak tengok ada water tak? Ni tak ada kan? Yang ni Allah. Kalau yang ni tak ada juga water kan? So it does not produce water. Lepas tu glucose, apa ni? Glucose is oxidized completely into carbon dioxide and water. Tapi kalau fermentation, glucose is not oxidized completely into ethanol, carbon dioxide or lactic acid. Okay, and then in terms of the amount of energy produced, awak tengok one molecule of glucose generate 2898 kJ of energy. Ni awak tengok ni. Okay, ni cikgu cakap tadi. One molecule of glucose will produce 98 kJ of energy. Itu satu glucose. Kalau 10 glucose awak darat 10 je lah. Tapi kalau fermentation, one molecule of glucose will generate 210 kJ. This one is for alcoholic fermentation. Yang ni. Yang ni dia akan hasilkan 210 kJ. Tapi kalau lactic acid fermentation, it only produce, ni sepatutnya ditulis ni, 150 kJ of energy. So you can see which one will produce more energy. So for sure, aerobic respiration. Okay. So dalam exam, dia akan tanya awak tahu, why aerobic respiration produce higher amount of energy compared to fermentation? So jawapan dia kat sini pertama sekali awak cakap, because it involve the complete breakdown of glucose into apa? Into carbon dioxide, water and energy. And then it happen in the presence of oxygen. Itu jawapan dia. While fermentation ni, okay, the breakdown of glucose is incomplete. Lepas tu dia tak gunakan oxygen ataupun limited oxygen condition. Okay? Okay guys, so I think that's all for today's class. So I hope you guys can watch this video until the end, and if you cannot understand, you can rewatch. Okay, so once you're done, please try to complete the exercise on bioscore. Okay, so on the next class, we are going to proceed, okay, with the discussion about this respiration. Okay, so I think that's all for today. So have a nice day. Assalamualaikum.